I think of the life of a miner who must work all his day underground, where his lamplight is all that will shine there, and it's dark and it's damp all around. It is 2 or 3 miles to the coal face, and the tunnel is jagged and low, but he cannot find work on the surface, so it's down in the mines he must go.
I'm joined here in the Arigna mining experience by Sheerin, a former miner here in Arigna up until when they closed back in 1990. Gay, as good a place as any maybe to start off is with the route here leading to the mines on what's known now as the Miner's Way. And you got quite a surprise one day when you finished up your work in the mines. You came out, relatively good morning when you were going in, but you came out and you were greeted with what could be described as blizzard-like conditions.
Indeed, John, yeah. I think it was around the mid-80s, maybe about 85, I'm not exactly sure, but we had gone in the morning and it was one of those bright days where the sun was shining bright, but you knew there was something in the air. But when we came out in the evening, maybe about 4 o'clock, and you wouldn't see your finger with snow, and the snow was very, very deep. Now, only for like everybody else, you'd know your way home, and I had to walk. So I got out to the head of the road, and once you knew the bends and that, but when I got to the top of the mountain, the snow was waist deep. It was up to here. And the only way I could find my way was the telegraph poles on the left-hand side. I knew where they were, and I came in about 7 or 8 yards from them, and you're in the middle of the road. And look, I was in the house at the bottom of Stanton's at the time, obviously. So I was walking back to it, and I got home all right, but it was one of the worst experiences from a snow point of view, anyway, coming out of there.
Yeah. The whole effort that time getting to and from work, it was maybe motor cars mightn't have been all that common maybe for people working in it. A lot of the miners used to travel to work on the back of a lorry that would be used for transporting coal to the nearby power station or different destinations.
You know, in my growing up, we were surrounded by mines, and growing up, we all knew all the different mines, and I was trying to name them out there. We had Noon's Pit was at the top of the mountain on the right-hand side. Sonny Flynn's pit was beside it. Flynn and Leahy was over in Altygowlin, Derrynavogie, Rock Hill, Rover, Winds, who would be cousins of mine, over in Aughnasheelin. So we knew all the pits, and we knew all the men that went to them. Now, my father-in-law, Paddy O'Connor, was from Giva, and he used to walk over the mountain to number 1, as they used to call it, which was Lynn's Pit. And he was, even when he was 90 years of age, he'd still remember the humps and hollows inside under the ground where he worked. So, you know, they left an indelible impression on the mind. But the first, Peter Kerrigan, who's still to the good alive in Ballyfarren, thank God, Peter said that they used to walk from the house up to Jack Noon's pit. And then Jack Noon got a truck. He had a fabulous truck, a lovely orange truck with a trailer on it. And there was a Hayden man from Boyle used to drive it. And they used to go up on that. And then Jack Noon invested in one of the Volkswagen vans that you see now going around the country, love, peace and love, and the 1969 things. And Mickey Cassidy used to drive that van, and he'd start in Arigna and he'd come around. Donald Conway used to be in it. I think Vincent Waters used to be in it, and they'd pick up Henry Hart, who used to be sitting on the steps of Killoran's, Peter Kerrigan, and anyone who was around there used to go up and into Jack Noon's pit. And Mickey Cassidy then come down in the evening. He was a great man for a lift, because we used to go down to Ronan Glynn's land at Malone. And all he used to do would be waiting at the corner, and Mickey would get in, and a great smile and all that thing from Mickey. He was a lovely man. And that was the transport until people started getting their own transport, motorbikes. I can still hear Martin McGourty going down at 7 o'clock in the morning heading for Rock Hill. No matter how hard a night he had the night before, he always went down. He was great to go to work. And a lot of them got motorbikes. But in Arigna, when the when the dance was going well in Drumshanbo, you could have 40 motorbikes. The Honda 50 was the big thing, and Michael Christie, as I remember, had a 175, a lovely blue 175 that he kept spotless. And that was the transport, and everybody then started getting their cars, and they mightn't be the best of cars, but you had cover on them anyway, you know. So that was the change for me, you know, from the walking up to your own cars until we finished up, you know.
It was an evolution of the way the
It was an
transport
evolution,
worked to it.
it was.
We talked about the miners having this walk to get to work and the walk home. Now, you probably brought the fitness levels to another degree as well, that you were an inter-county footballer for many years with Roscommon, would have played club footballer here with St. Ronan's. When you think about the demands that working in the mines would have on your body, and then you'd have to go for inter-county training, play big matches, how exhausting of a process was it combining both?
Well, I suppose at the time you didn't pass much heed on it. I used to be able to, well, look, the fact that I wasn't drinking or I wasn't smoking was probably a huge help. We were fit. We trained. We had Monday off. That's
From the mines?
From the mines, and from football.
From football.
Yeah, because we used to train in Roscommon maybe Tuesday, Thursday, train with St. Ronan's on Wednesday, train on Friday, then Saturday morning, then a game on Sunday. So you had Monday off, and we used to, you know, it was tough because physically you were doing a lot of physical work inside in the mines, because you were inside and you were, when I started off and I got the hand 8 number first, as everybody does when you go into the mine first, the first thing that you're put on is probably the rake, where you have to clip all the hutches together, these here, and get them out to the hill, and they were coped out on the hill, and that was the first job. And then as according as you got experience, you went inside and you were helping out, shoveling and that kind of thing. But then when you went at the brushing, that was the hardest. That was very, very physical, because you were shoveling maybe 12 or 14 ton of rock in a day and putting it down gobs and putting some into this and that kind of. From a physical point of view, it was very, very severe. There's no doubt about it. I always found that after a game, if we had a league match anywhere back at that time in the middle 80s, we'd go to maybe down south or up to the north or that. I was never able to drive home because I'd start falling asleep, and that was one of the downsides of it. And it was just the fact that you were totally wore out, and you know, there's maybe the air in the pit and all that kind of thing, you know, would probably have affected you as well. But the biggest thing was that you definitely wouldn't be able to drive home. And physically then, the good thing about when I worked in Flynn and Leahy, and that I always got Saturday off. I wasn't supposed to get it off, but I used to get it off, and Mickey Rinn used to say, when I wasn't in, I've told you this before, when I wasn't in, Sheerin was watching the Ruby, you know. But to be prepared for I used to be in Roscommon at 1 o'clock on a Saturday, so you wouldn't get to work. But I used to work on a Monday then at the brushing in Flynn and Leahy. Yeah. And in fairness to Dennis, he was good.
Facilitated,
yeah.
Always, and would there be many here then on a Monday? Was the pit an eerie place when you were walking maybe without the usual contingent here on a Monday?
There was. It was an eerie place on a Monday because it was getting set for Tuesday, and you had to get ready for the machine men. So the brushing had to be done. Donald Conway and myself used to work together. Stephen Flynn used to work together. Peter Cairns used to work with me as well. And we'd, you know, when the place was, when the machine men were inside, we had to clear all the roads beforehand, so we were brushing. So you'd only have maybe Jerry Degnan and Michael McDermott or Paddy Waters or Pat McManus or Paddy McNamara there on a Monday. It was a skeleton crew just to get ready for Tuesday. So that was, it was an eerie place, there's no doubt about it. But you know, the thing about it is that when you went through so many branches in the pit, you knew that there was nothing in it that would scare you or anything like that. You know, just that it was a lonely place for 1 or 2 or 3 fellas.
Yeah, you can just imagine. Coming out from a day's work and you're in underground, and if you can maybe contrast it, you come out then from the mines and you're met with the view then from on top of the mountain, this panoramic view, in some instances looking down at Loch Allen, like what we have here. What was that experience like?
Oh, well, I mean, that'll take your breath away for a start, anyway, you know, you know, no matter when you came out, the scene was, I won't say it was different every day, but it changed it depends on the time of year or whatever. And when you look around, you see, especially in the summertime, look down, you see the hay being done in different fields and that, and each day was bringing change. One of the things that you'd notice after a few years was place that would be planted, and then after 3 or 4 or 5 years, you see the difference of all the plantation coming up towards Altagowl and over that on the far side of the river and all that. You see, those are the things that you see most. Mm-hmm. You see a lot of that, but it was always nice to come out, and at the same time, when the winter was very, very cold, it was nice to go in because the temperature dropped when you were inside. Yeah. And the heat in the place, when you'd be working hard inside, the sweat would be flowing down off you,
Those plantations probably have gone into full forest now that people can see when they're out here on the Miners' Way. Talk to me a little bit about the whole, I suppose, camaraderie, the spirit that was there with the miners. You'd have seen it as well in dressing rooms for many years as a footballer and as a manager, as a selector. But the camaraderie in the mine, where you're working with, colleagues day in, day out. Talk to me about what that spirit was like.
Well, that was very, very good. I mean, you always got to slagging. There's lots of things that you remember when you were playing the football. You'd always get a bit of ribbon, and if you lost a game, Terence Cullen would say to you on a Tuesday, "There's a 6-inch nail inside there for you." He says, "In the wall. I'm after putting it in." I says, "What's that for?" "Oh, to hang your boots on." That's what Terence would tell you. And Terence didn't know anything about football, but he knew how to give it to you on a Tuesday.
If you lost a game.
If you lost a game when you come in. And if you won a game, he wouldn't say a word at all,
Yeah.
That other crowd were no
good. And it's important maybe to note as well, Gabe, the geographical makeup here of Arigna and where the mines are. You have the large percentage of it in Roscommon, but you also had areas like in Terence's case that were going into Sligo and coming into Leitrim as well. So there was a lot of inter-county rivalry there.
There was, yeah. You had the 3 sections there. I mean, Sligo was on the upper side, but the good thing about it is that John Martin Carty and Michael and Eamon hadn't a bit heat on football. I used to ask John Martin one time, "Did you ever look at a match?" "No," he says, "they're like midgets running around the television." So that's what John Martin's thought on football, and I couldn't understand this. Yeah. And then you had Jimmy McNamara down on the Leitrim side of it there, Trumkieran, So you were going to get it from all sides, but you always got it from fellas that didn't know anything about football. Yeah. They'd give it you, whereas the guy that would be involved in the football would be a little bit more tentative with you. Mm-hmm. But there was great camaraderie in it, and there was a lot. You see, there was great respect for the older men in it. I mean, when you think back to the guys when I went into it, I started first in '69. You see, in Sonny Flynn's pit out beside Jack Noon's, and I only went in there on a Saturday. Around the Christmas and that, and then when the summer came, I worked for the summer holidays in it, and you got a feel for the place then, and fellas that help you out. So when I had to go back into it again, I went back in about 1981, I'd say, because I was intent on building a house there at the bottom of Stanton's, and the economy was in bad shape because everything was, and we say this, interest rates were 19%. And money was hard to get, and there was council loans and that kind of thing, but you wouldn't have paid off in donkeys. You still wouldn't have paid off if you were still at it. So from that point of view, I went into it from an economic sense, and I was glad to get to work. And it was beside me, and I could, when I go home in the evening, excuse me, I start on the house and build a few blocks every evening or that kind of thing. So I was going along with that. But, there was a lot of experience in the mines. There was a lot of men that knew how to be in the mine and how to work in it.
And work safely.
And if anybody came into it, of course, the first thing was when anybody came into it, what is he like? Is he knacky? Is he handy? Or is he, and if he wasn't, I remember my father telling about some fella had got job above in Jack Noon's pit. And of course, by the time they go out at peacetime, maybe at 11 o'clock for something to eat, they'd be wondering how this man was getting on. And next thing, when they land out, he says, one of the firemen says to him, he says, "How are you getting on with that man?" "Not too bad," he says, "I just got him to lie down." and that was at 11 o'clock in the day, so he didn't last.
And unless, as you mentioned there, and I often heard that phrase, unless you were handy, unless you were knacky, you could be a hard worker, but you wouldn't probably survive unless you had those characteristics of being good at your hands.
Being good at the hands, and you know, as the old saying was, take the work out of the work. You know, instead of, you know, you'd just have to be cute, because there was a lot of heavy physical work inside, but you could take a lot of you wouldn't do a lot of lifting if you could avoid it, because as I say, when you had the gob there, you'd push stuff down the gob and you wouldn't have to be putting it into hutches like this, and the more you got down the gob, the less had to go out on the hill. But there was great men, and Joe Guihan was probably the first one that I kind of worked with, and Joe was working on what they call the loose end. The machine had cut around there, and it'd keep cutting around. But then there was a kind of a corner of rock that had to be taken out, or coal that had to be taken out. And Joe Guihan would go in there, and he'd be the air pick. He'd have the goose to put in a couple of spats and loosen the coal, and he'd take all that out. I mean, it could be a week or 10 days to taking out this, but he was so good at his work and so neat at his work that he was always able to get it done. And then by the time he had that done, he nearly had to start again. But those type of men were always very, very good at what they were at. And the machine men then, you see, everybody relied on the next man coming. It's the same as building a house. Yeah. You know, if the foundations are good, the block layer has a great job. If the brushing is done, the guy with the machine has no problem getting through.
The unit is as strong as its weakest link.
Exactly, and that was it. And that's the way it operated.
I think of the life of the miner who must work all his day underground, where his lamplight is all that will shine there, and it's dark and it's damp all around. It is 2 or 3 miles to the coal face, and the tunnel is jagged and low, but he cannot find work on the surface, so it's down in the mines he must go.